Okay, so now we're into segment two. And this starts off with probably the biggest, uh, it's all about the children, right? So the biggest problem, besides the effects on women, is the effects on the children. Okay. Um, and like I was sharing before, I feel that this is the problem because it stems from so many, it basically crosses a lot of areas. And not to say that every child that is actually in a domestic violence home is going to turn out to be abusive or to be a victim going forward. Okay, so that's not necessarily the case. But if we want to say it, even half are going to, wouldn't we want to do something about it? I mean, God doesn't want to leave any one of us behind, and the same thing with the children. We don't want to leave any of them behind. And this is what we're doing when they're in abusive homes. We're really leaving them behind. We're really leaving them behind because they're not able to thrive. They're not able to do the best that they possibly can. Okay, and it's sad. So we got a power and control wheel again, and I took it from the same place, that Duluth uh, model, and this is the abuse of children. Okay, so this one shows up, and you have a lot of emotional abuse, the put downs, the name calling. You could, and this one is kind of weird. This model, I'm kind of going back and forth. Like, it actually will say like using the children to get information about the other parent. So basically, what's saying here is like, say this is like a divorce situation, okay, or a separation. Then, one parent can use the other, the children to get information between each other. But then the put downs and the name calling can be directed towards the child. So, like, there's two different applications I see this, or shaming the child. So, there's some directed towards the child. The other way is kind of using them and then kind of like a triangle between you got the abuser, and then you got the children, and then you got the victim. Okay, so I kind of see some overlap, and then you have isolation. Okay, you could isolate the children from peers, grandparents. We hear that a lot, right? And even in just divorce cases, right, where they can't see the grandparents from the other family. Okay, so there's things like that, or isolation from siblings. Used to use of institutions like you're going to, actually threatening with God. Okay, or God comes into play here. You don't want to go to, you want to go to heaven. You don't want to go down below, but for what you're doing, don't want to. And then you got courts and the police and the schools and the juveniles and foster homes and things like that. And maybe it all starts with intimidation, like fears and looks and gestures and yelling and things like that. And then the use of adult privilege, because they're parents, right? That kids are meant to be put on this earth to be servants, okay? Or threats, threats that you're going to abandon them, right? Feeling alone. A lot of children worry about being alone. Uh, Committed physical harm, things like that. Okay, and then how about economic abuse? And we also hear about neglect. I think neglect falls under a little bit of an economic abuse, right? Not providing for the children, not, maybe not taking them to see doctors, things like that. So that's what you would see with child abuse. We're going to spend a lot of time here, just to let you know that. So these are some of what we saw in the power control wheel, and we went over pretty much all of them. So I list them there. So what should the wheel look like? How should we, and we're going to go back to that same model. I go back to the Duluth model again. This is great. It's got lots of models here. It's really great wheels. So we have that you want to be build a relationship based on trust and respect. And I can't emphasize that enough. We had given a program to teenagers between the ages of 11 and 14 on how to choose respect. Okay. And the program outlined what a healthy relationship should look like. Okay. And that's the biggest thing is what should it look like? And it's built on trust and respect, acknowledging the child's feelings. I think that's, a big deal, a big deal. And it is a big deal even when you're dealing with victims, is you want to acknowledge their feelings, not denying what they feel. If they feel scared, they feel scared. If they feel sad, they feel sad. If they feel angry, they feel angry. It's okay. You can feel anything you want to feel, but what you do about it is the problem. Okay. So with children, you want to promote emotional security. You need to make sure they feel safe, comfortable, uh, cared for, concerned, dependable. You want to be dependable with them. You want to provide emotion. You want to provide physical security, food, shelter, water, personal hygiene, clothes, those things. You want to uh, care for your own self. Parents need to care for their own self. Okay. Give affection. Okay. Encourage support. So, if they are involved in sports or activities, you want to take part in them. You want to give them your time. Okay. You want to give them encouragement with their school and things that they're involved in. You want to be a part of their life. That's how it is. And then provide discipline. And discipline, we do have a fine line with discipline. And it really is being consistent, and it's a struggle. Okay. So you have to be consistent. You got to really, I worked a lot with this with my older son. You have to set up guidelines. You got to remember. I mean, so much that if you have older children and then you have younger children and there are a big gap, they're going to remember, the older children, what you did for them and what you now allow with your younger children. And they get upset about that. And I'm not saying that's abuse because it's not, but I'm just saying that's just an example of how to try to be consistent. Okay. We have a house rule that no child in our family gets a phone until they're 13. By 13, I should say they can have a phone, but they have no self-service or texting capability. They only get a plan because that's when typically a 13-year-old, in my mind, can be somewhere at a practice without their parents there and need to call home. That's it. It's pretty plain and simple. Okay. So we have tried to keep that even when I've been asked, can I get a phone? Can I get a phone? No. And a lot of parents don't want to tell their kid no either. So we have to learn that there is no, there are limits. And we got to be clear about the limits and the expectations. Okay. So the more you're consistent, the less you're going to get pushback. That's really it. Okay. So we went over this information right here. And that's what a healthy model looks like. Okay. So child abuse. The main Sometimes the main one it seems like we hear about is the sexual abuse. And this is the one, and of course there's emotional abuse, physical abuse, and neglect. So there's four. Okay. So basically, sexual abuse is really forced or tickled sexual contact between adult and child. Okay, that's it. But it can also be don't be it can be two children as well. Okay. I will add that. But in our case, that's what we're focusing on. So what are the indicators? So the physical indicators of the child would be pain or itching in the genital area, pregnancy, difficulty walking and sitting, unweary to change for gym or participate in physical education class, unusual sexual behavior, weary of physical contact, and onset of bedwetting. These are just some of them. And it's not to say that, if a child wets the bed, that instantly you need to think about their studying sexual abuse. No, not necessarily. Okay. Indicators of of the behavior of the parent. Very protective, jealous of the child, has low self-esteem, lack in social and emotional contact outside the family, misuses drugs or alcohol. Maybe. about the drugs and alcohol. Doesn't necessarily have to be. Okay. Emotional abuse. So, what would this look like? So, these are consistent emotional, verbal assaults that make the child feel sad, worthy, or unwanted. Okay. What are the physical indicators that a child may actually exhibit? Speech disorders, lags in physical development, failure to thrive, habit disorders, conduct disorders, neurotic traits, behavioral extremes, inappropriate, uh, infantile, maybe regressing, going back to like, say, uh, preschool type behavior, learning problems, and attempted suicide. Okay, that's really big. And actually, and then for the parent, treats children in the family unequal, does not seem to care much about the child's problems, blames or belittles the child, cold, rejecting, nothing, finds nothing good or attractive about the child, demonstrates inconsistent behavior towards the child. You're going to find some overlap in some of these. And the same thing when we come to, uh, I feel some of those parent indicators might be the same for physical abuse. So, a physical abuse, you have battering, beating, physical harm, injuring a child under the age of 18 by a person who is responsible for the child's welfare. Okay. These are some of the indicators with this. You have children could have unexplained bruises, burns, fractures, head injuries, and human bites. So I don't know many of you. I have been to the pediatrician, and it was funny. Uh, my son would get injured on the playground or whatever. And, he would always say to me, the doctor, "Oh, it doesn't matter, bruises from the knee down and bruises on the, arms usually are not we don't look for those indicators as domestic violence, okay? They look for anything that is usually in places where you can't see, okay? That's typically where some of that's going to happen. Okay. The abuser's going to know that they're not going to put an injury on a child if it's somewhere where they can actually be seen. Okay. All right. Weary of adult contact, aggressive. This is some of the how the behavior would be to a child who's been physically abused. Hyperactive, frightened of parents, unnatural dependency, afraid to go home, terrified to make mistakes, wears long sleeves, and hides injuries. You know, I could see an example in my head, like, a child's at school and they spill their milk in the cafeteria and they get totally, 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 totally terrified of that happening and go into just a big humongous meltdown. Maybe that could be an indicator. Uh and some kids do wear long sleeves uh in the summertime. uh so that's kind of a hard indicator. Some kids just want to, be like that. I don't know. It's not necessarily one. You can't really take just one. What I would say is if one did stand out in your mind, maybe you need to investigate. Okay. Oh, excuse me, went up too far. Okay. So what would be the parent's behavior? Seems unconcerned about the child, anxious, overwhelmed by the child's needs, takes longer time to obtain medical care for their child, gives different explanations for the same injury, sees the child bad or evil, has poor impulse control. Okay. Some of these parental behaviors are kind of hard to see if you're just seeing this person every once in a while or, once. So, how about neglect? And neglect is failure to provide for a child's physical and emotional needs, like shelter, food, water, clothing, and supervision. What are some of the physical behaviors that you'll see? Consistently hungry, poor hygiene, inappropriately dressed, lack of supervision, unattended physical problems, medical or dental, begging or stealing food, attendance at school infrequent, attending school late arrival or stay late. Okay. Not to say if you have someone attending school late every single day that that could be the problem, that they're neglect. It would be that one probably would be an easier one to fix to say, "How come you're always late? What's the reasoning for being late?" Usually you have to give a reason. So uh, I don't know. That would be something that you would just have to maybe talk to the parent about, see. Okay. So what about the behavior, the indicators for the parent? Maybe misuses drugs or alcohol, has organized, upsetting home life, long-term chronic illnesses, isolated from friends, family, neighbors, exposed children, and unsafe living conditions. I mean, yeah, the parent could have chronic illness that causes them to be late. That doesn't necessarily mean that the child's being neglected, um, for school. So, if you want to go to this website here, I put it's CASA Speaks for Children, and it identifies the different types of child abuse. Okay, and it gives you some long-term effects of child abuse. Okay. And one of those lasting effects may be they carry this on, and this is a cycle for them. And this is how they've learned how to uh, deal with problems. Okay, so that's really what the maybe the long term effect might be. Okay, but there could be some long term effects physically to the child as well. Okay, so you may ask, how often does this happen, especially when it comes to child sexual abuse? So, again, more staggering statistics. 1 in 5 girls, 1 in 7 boys are physically abused before the age of 18. Sexual abuse uh, has been reported up to 80, 80,000 times a year. That's a lot. That's just a lot. That is just a lot. And An estimated 77% of reported abusers are parents, 16% of our other relatives, and 6% are non related. Okay, so we are trying to teach children about sexual abuse, and it may be coming from their parents. So we definitely have to, educate. That is a big deal. And so another place that I went to look is called this RAIN organization, the child abuse tells you defines a child sexual abuse, what exactly it is, sex trafficking is counted in there. Uh, okay, goes into great detail. I'm not going to go into great detail. Okay, I think we all can figure out what that is. And again, talks about this, what does the predators of sexual assault abuse look like? Okay. Uh, it says here as many as 93% of the victims under the age of 18 know the abuser. That goes along with what we just said, right? We just said that 6% are non-related. So that's almost that basically it's basically a family member of some sort. Okay. And it tells us how can I protect my child from sexual abuse, okay? Tell your talk to your child. You should talk to your child before any of that. Uh, okay. So, and this goes into a lot of behavioral signs as well. Okay. So, uh, you can check that out for more. Now, you're going to say to me, so who is responsible for working with youth and defining child abuse? Okay, this you go over this in the safe environment training or any training where you are going to work with youth. And we can do that in the church. Okay, I'm a catechesis teacher, so I have had to have this training. And also so if we were to give a program to 11 to 14-year olds, we would have to have this training. And so really, uh, we are under North Carolina law to actually report. Okay. So basically, I'm going to skip down. It says defining child abuse. Okay. So we already did. We kind of went over the child abuse situation. Okay. And we'll go down to where it says North Carolina state law. Any person or institute who has cause to believe that any juvenile is abused, neglected, or dependent, or has died as a result of abuse shall report the case of that juvenile to the Department of Human Resources in the county where the juvenile lives or is found. Okay? I'm going to tell you, even if you do not teach, you're not a teacher, you're not involved with students at a church, okay, you still could be a person to report, okay, because it could be a family member or it could be a neighbor, something like that, okay. uh I realize that the defining child abuse, I have it here twice, so sorry about that, but I have it here twice, right there, and it's up there. Okay. All right. So, neglect represents the most common type of reported and substantial form of abuse. So that's kind of good in some respects. I'd rather hear that. I'd rather hear neglect. Okay. So, so, uh, actually, I see. Yeah. Okay. So it's the same amount. Okay. Yeah. So, you could go here to about child abuse. This is the CAC North Carolina. That's the other thing. Different states have different laws. So, but this talks about it if you want to get more information. Okay. And it basically says a child is considered abused if his or her parent, guardian, custodian, or caregiver does any of the following: causes serious physical harm to the child that does not happen by accident, creates a substantial risk of serious physical injury to the child other than an auto accident, uses cruel or grossly inappropriate discipline to the child, okay, commits sex crimes against the child, okay, causes serious emotional damage to the child, commits a crime of human trafficking, involuntary servitude, or social or sexual servitude against the child, encourages or approves of delinquent behavior that involves immoral acts of the child. Okay. That's what constitutes what it is. Now, what if you're not sure? Okay. It's okay because you can report anonymously. All right. So, this is how to report child abuse. The report shall include the information as known to be to that person. So, basically, you need to know the name, the address of the child, the name and address of the juvenile's parent, guardian, or caretaker, age of the juvenile, name and ages of the other juveniles in the home, and the present location of the juvenile if not at home. Now, you may not know all that information. You may just know the name and the address. Maybe just to know the name, actually. Because say you're working and you may have to go to, if you're working with children, you may have to go to the higher up to find out the juvenile's parent or guardian or their address. Okay. You might have to do a little bit of investigative work. Okay. So, you need to put the nature and the extent of any injury or concern that you have, okay, regarding abuse, and any other information which the person is making the report might be useful, and establishes the need for protective services or court I see a spelling intervention. Okay. So step one would be to do what you did. Okay. You've reported. Okay. You may choose to enclose your name or be anonymous. Step two will not be for you. You're done. Your part's done. Okay. You might not even know what's going to happen. You're not going to get a report. You're not going to get anything. You're probably never going to know. Okay. Unless you work with this person or whatever and they become arrested or they confide in you or what happens, but you may not know. Step two, for sexual abuse report, the Department of Human Services will notify the State Bureau of Investigation within 24 hours or the next day or business day. The Bureau of Investigation will conduct a thorough investigation. Upon receipt of a report of neglect, emotional, or physical abuse, the Department of Human Services will make a prompt and thorough investigation in order to determine the facts of the case. The extent of the abuse or neglect or the risk of harm to the juvenile in order to determine whether protective services should be provided to the juvenile a complaint filed as a petition. So the important thing here to realize they're not all four created equal. Sexual abuse is the most important one out of these. Then it's physical abuse. Okay? Physical abuse, they will physical abuse, neglect, and emotional harm, they will do an investigation, but it may take longer. The physical abuse is suspected after they've done their investigation that the process is initiated within 24 hours of the report. Okay? If neglect or dependency is determined, then it would be up to 72 hours. Okay? So it depends on the circumstances around abuse, on how serious it's taken into consideration. Step 3. If the Department of Human Services finds the evidence that the juvenile may have been abused, an immediate oral or written report or findings is made to the district attorney office and local law enforcement agency within 48 hours upon receipt. Now, keep in mind that if it was just neglect, it may take like a whole week now. Okay. If we add up all the days, 72 hours, that's, you know what, 3 days. Okay. And then we have another 48 up to 5. Okay. That's a whole week. Okay. Of business days. Okay. Step 4. Law enforcement agencies immediately or no later than 48 hours initiate and coordinate a criminal investigation with the Protective Services Agency. Okay. Upon completion of the investigation, the district attorney shall determine whether criminal prosecution is appropriate. Okay. That's a lot of information. It's a lot of steps, but we don't necessarily need to know that. We just need to know that it does exist. Okay. And the important part was the part that I mentioned at the very beginning, which was step one. Okay. So this talks about this site here is the North Carolina Judicial Branch, and it talks about what is juvenile court, because that's where it will go. What are the important terminologies of Department of Social Services? What are they? What is the CPS, which is the Child Protective Services? Okay. When do laws on a children on abuse, neglect, and dependency apply? Okay, so it goes into more detail and explains it a little bit more. And it talks about the abuse. Again, they're talking about what you see here is serious physical injury. Okay, creates a sustainable risk of serious injury. Okay, we went over these. Okay, so there's got to be some seriousness to it. Okay, not to say that one act cannot, can't be serious. Okay, so good news. We are now end of segment 2. So I'm going to stop recording, wherever I can find it. It's over here in the corner usually. Okay, I'll stop sharing my screen and then I'll stop recording here. Hold on.